Hi everyone! Welcome back to another episode of Roll for Initiative. Today we're going to be talking about Thunderscape, the World of Aden.
Thunderscape is a new setting primarily for the Pathfinder system. It's released by Kyoudai Games, and you can pick up the PDF over at DriveThruRPG for only 20 bucks. It was really great. At Gen Con last year, we got to sit down with Sean and Ryan Carman, the people who helped create the game, and play a test run of the system. We had a really great time playing the game, and so we picked it up and had a one-shot long session with a bunch of our friends. So we just kind of want to tell you what we thought of the game. We really liked it, and we want to talk about what some of the major strengths are and what we enjoy so much. There's a few things that could still use a little bit of tweaking, but it's pretty brand new, and it's a really solid game for how young it still is. So first off, if Thunderscape or World of Aden sounds familiar to you, it probably is. In 1995, it came out for Windows and DOS as a computer game, and in '96 was the original attempt at a pen and paper. Kyoudai Games acquired the rights not too long ago, and they've put together a pretty great little world. One thing that makes the game so strong are the new races, character classes, and the world that's been built around it. A lot of detail has gone into all of these different things.
So there are the standard races. You have humans, elves, dwarves, and giraffes. They're pretty much the same as orcs. Now the new races are the Fairkin, the Garou, and the Rapacian.
There are two other brand new races, the Illithics and the Echoes. They're both really cool. We didn't use them in this playthrough, so we're not going to spend too much time talking about them, but they do look like a really interesting couple of races to add to your party dynamic.
Now the Fairkin are anthropomorphized animals. They were created through magic, and it originally meant to be slaves, but they got too smart to be slaves. There are a whole variety of them.
For the most part, there are three main types. There are the sneaks, hunters, and brutes. The hunters are your tigers, your lions, your jackals. Sneaks are raccoons or rabbits or foxes. And the brute might be a rhinoceros or a water buffalo or an elephant. They're the really big animals. In the setting, there are the Garou and the giraffe as well, like Dawn said. They're neat. They feel a little tacked on, to be honest. The giraffe are orcs. They've got manes, and there's some history stuff there, but they're orcs, and that's really it. The Garou are goblins. The book kind of goes out of their way to say they're totally not goblins, but they're goblins. The humans are humans, the half-elves are half-elves. The elves and the dwarfs are literally just the same template as from any other Pathfinder setting, but they're kind of aloof and you don't see them too much. The fact that those races are sort of thin on details doesn't make it feel cheap or like you're getting cheated out of anything at all. I think essentially Kyoudai just said, hey, these races, there's a lot of detail in the other books. We're not going to charge you more or make our book thicker just to reiterate it here. And honestly, while I might like a little bit of detail and separation between orc and giraffe or Garou and goblin, I appreciate that they did that. It streamlines the book and it streamlines the read.
So the other new race, the Rapacians, are a really, really awesome race. They are this lizard-like people, and there's so much in the book about not only the race, but also just their culture. One of our friends played a Rapacian in our game.
He incorporated the fact that Rapacians are very family-oriented, and also the fact that Rapacians, you can't tell their gender just by looking at them.
Even in the book, they mention that other Rapacians can't always tell what gender another Rapacian is.
So that was a really neat little character detail that Matt happened to work in. Looking at the book, the Rapacians are clearly what Kyoudai put the most work into. And if they didn't, it still comes off that way. The most is written about them. That detail is great. I would love to see in further revisions that much detail put in about the Fairkin or fleshing out the Garou maybe. It's really, really nice, and I just want to see that level put into everything.
So the new classes that we played were the Golemoid, Entomancer, Fallen, Arbiter, Seer, and Steamwright.
There's a few other classes. We didn't include them in our playthrough. They're the Thaumaturg, the Thunder Scout, and the Mecha Mage. They seem really great. go buy the PDF and check them out for yourself. They're really well thought out. We just didn't have enough players in order to include them in our campaign. To go through this really quickly, because we don't want to make this entire episode just about explaining what this game is, but a few of the classes really stood out for all of us. And I GM'd this session, but some of the favorites from the session that stood out to me were the Golemoid, which is essentially this mix of person and machine. And while they're powerful, there are some really nasty drawbacks to playing them. Also, there was just the Steamwright, and the Steamwright's really cool because they're a mechanic, they're a tinkerer, they're an inventor, and the person who played our Steamwright, Tucker, really helped contribute to the overall flow and continuity of the group.
Now, the Entomancers are spellcasters that specialize in summoning various kinds of bugs. You can specialize. It's kind of terrifying. Our Entomancer summoned like this swirling mass of spiders which attacked somebody, and that was just terrifying to think of. And then the Seers they're somewhat similar to oracles, get visions and see into the future, whether that's the big picture of, oh my gosh, we've got to avoid this, or even just a snap moment of seeing a second into the future and realizing, if we fire this gun, we're going to attract so much more, we have to do this quietly.
One of the most interesting parts of the Thunderscape world is the fact that Kyoudai took such a long time really building a world. It's sort of a post-apocalyptic world. Something called the Darkfall happened, and it decimated the population of the planet. And that's a really important part of the game and something to keep in mind should you pick it up. Now, there's a lot of nations, and it's kind of neat because the book talks about that really the division between races isn't nearly as important as people being more concerned what nation you're from. In so many fantasy settings, it's the idea of elves don't like dwarves, don't like minotaurs, don't like humans. And that's really not a big deal in this setting, and that's a pretty cool and new twist.
Also, the maps in the book are gorgeous. It gives you a really clear idea of where everything is in the world, where the different nations are, and they're just gorgeous to look at.
Really, overall, 90% of the book in the PDF, the artwork is amazing. Now, we try to stay pretty honest here, so we're going to tell it like it is. The artwork in the race section is a little 90s flash game-tastic. And honestly, that doesn't hurt the game whatsoever. You can still have a really great time. It doesn't even factor in once you've gotten out of the text. But for future releases, I would love to see the same artist who did the other 90% of the book go back and kind of touch up the artwork in that section.
One of the things that the setting does really well is mixing technology and magic. I was a little hesitant when I first heard that it was a fantasy setting that had steam engines and guns. I was like, I don't know how well this is going to work out. But the way the setting does it is very good. There's a nice balance of magic still being very important, but technology just being introduced and still being new, so it's not as powerful as like a modern setting would be. Manite is the only metal that can hold magic, so it's really important in the world and in the setting.
It's also rare and expensive, so it sort of makes sense that there's not a lot of magically enchanted things, or there are some magically enchanted things, but it's certainly something that you notice and take note of. They do a very good job of, this is not Shadowrun set in Pathfinder by any stretch of the imagination. Everything that they did with technology on one side, magic on the other, and the intersections, it all makes sense, and it's all unique to the Thunderscape setting.
So it uses the Pathfinder system, but Thunderscape also has conversions for Mini 6, Roll and Keep, and Fate. And they have more coming out. They're constantly getting updates up onto their blog. I think Core is one of the next updates that they've got coming.
Our session was pretty straightforward, and we had a friend in from out of town, so we knew that we only had one night to get the whole story done, or at least as much of it as made sense. Something that we did to help facilitate that is I pre-genned all of the characters. I gave a little wiggle room for people to flesh out some of their skills, But really, they were handed characters and came up with the backstory themselves. Tucker, Dawn, and Matt all knew each other from previous jobs.
Stephen, who played our Entomancer, was set up with the group through a friend of a friend for the job. And Brent, who was a seer, had a vision that he needed to be with the group.
Tucker played our Steamwright, Matt played our Golemoid, and Dawn played our Arbiter. Something I think that's important to note is that these classes really do feel unique and their own. The Arbiters are not just paladins. The Golemoids are not just steampunk street samurai. Everyone really does feel unique and like they belong in this world. Now, the book does cover how to incorporate pre-existing Pathfinder classes into the world, but honestly, I say if you're going to try a whole new campaign setting, go for broke and use what they already give you.
Tucker really liked the Nocturnes. The idea that they're the corrupted things in the world that came from the Darkfall.
We all also, as GM and as players, really appreciated the fact that there was the opportunity for instant and easy communication in the world. Honestly, it's one of the things that's so difficult and frustrating with a lot of fantasy settings, is that if you want to talk to someone, you have to see them or leave magical messages or a messenger pigeon or hockey. But in Thunderscape, they all had an earpiece and they could talk to each other. It just made playing the game easier, and it made GMing what was going on easier. So we all really appreciated that that was something that could happen.
And it made sense in the world. So one thing that we did have to do is kind of scale up the monsters. I mean, my character was dealing like 10 points of damage with every hit. The Golemoid was reaching around 20, and our poor Entomancer was like doing 1 and 2 points of damage. So to make it challenging, because we have guns, we have this magic and machine infused together, you might need to scale up some of your monsters just to make it a little bit more difficult. Or, you know, introduce some more Nocturne monsters, because those were just terrifying.
We did have a lot of Nocturnes, and that became a challenge for everybody, but the players were able to meet those challenges in very unique ways. While our Entomancer didn't do a lot of damage, what he was able to do was direct damage to attributes. So he created these swarms of spiders and scorpions that were doing damage directly to the dexterity of the bad guys, essentially paralyzing them and keeping them captive. An NPC or a bad guy that's doing that to your players is a pretty scary thing to think about from a player point of view.
So the hardcover's not out yet, but you can get the PDF from Drive-Thru RPG, and you can get a one-shot game for less than $10. I'll put a link to that around here.
We had a really great time playing Thunderscape, and we've all been talking about we're probably going to run that as our new campaign once we finish out the 2 or 3 that we're running at this point.
So thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and go check out Thunderscape World of Aden for yourself.
Bye, we'll see you next time on Roll for Initiative.